Well, welcome everyone to the University of Denver, their virtual open house. We're excited that you're joining us today. Before we start our session for financial aid, I wanted to go over a few logistics. We are offering both closed captioning and Spanish interpretation, which is available at the bottom of your toolbar. Also, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we are taking those questions to the Q&A feature, and we'll be responding to those questions throughout the presentation. But we also will be taking additional questions at the end of the presentation. And we're now excited to welcome Stephanie from the Financial Aid Office to be able to give us an overview of what financial aid process at the University of Denver might look like. Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. So happy you could join us tonight. My name is Stephanie Epstein, and I'm Assistant Director of Scholarships and Grants in the Financial Aid Office. And Kelly Graves is also joining me in the Q&A chat. She's going to be answering some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with our presentation here. All right. So this is just an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. So what does the Financial Aid Office do, and how do you know the costs? What are the FAFSA and CSS profile? What's conflicting information and some required forms? All of the different types of aid that we offer, some more information about special circumstance appeals, and as Shana said, we'll have time at the end for some more questions. All right, so the Financial Aid Office, what do we do? So we establish a cost of attendance. You'll be seeing throughout this presentation COA, and that's what that means. We collect financial aid data from families using aid applications, so the FAFSA and the CSS profile, to develop a student aid index. You might have heard of it before as expected family contribution, EFC. There's some changes to the FAFSA this year. We're going to talk about that a little later. We also offer federal, state, and institutional forms of financial aid, and we distribute resources equitably and while counseling families and students on the financial aid process. So determining cost of attendance is here. So the direct costs are those actually billed by your school. So you're always billed tuition and fees. If you're staying on campus and have a meal plan, you'll also be billed for those as well. Some other indirect costs, these are not billed by the school at all. It's just to really help you budget. And kind of those are some costs you may have just because you're a student. So books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses, all of these combine together to develop a cost of attendance. And we post all of our cost of attendances on our financial aid webpage. So there's some for some students living on campus, off campus, or living at home. Okay, so let's talk about the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. So I do want to say, and we're going to highlight some changes here, the 24-25 FAFSA is changing. And it has actually been delayed and opening in December instead of October. Keep in mind that's just this year only. It'll go back to opening in October like it usually does. You complete this form at studentaid.gov, and what it does, it collects tax data from the prior year. So you're actually using 2022 tax information, which you should already have at this time. So how you do it, students and parents have to create a federal student aid ID, so the FSA ID. It's an email password combination, every contributor, and we're going to talk about some more definitions of the FAFSA. And those are the people who are required to provide information on the FAFSA. They need that FSA ID. Studentaid.gov is also a great resource for other information, other federal aid tasks, such as loan applications and counseling. All right, so this FAFSA simplification. This is a new FAFSA starting in the 24-25 year. This came about because of a law enacted in 2021 and amended in 2022 that revamped the FAFSA process and federal aid eligibility determination. It is the most significant change in 40 years, but not to worry. That's why the financial aid offices all over are here to help students and families with questions. Some phases of this have already been implemented, and it's actually being finalized in the 24-25 year. So why the change? This is all part of a continuing effort to make FAFSA easier to understand, less burdensome, and more generous with aid. It's going to be a streamlined process with a better user experience, and it's been tested. One nice thing, it's translated into the 11 most common languages, and it really expands Pell Grant access. And it gives more information to students and families in determining the sources and the need eligibility as well. Okay, so we were talking before about some new verbiage. That student aid index is replacing expected family contribution. So you'll probably have heard EFC for a long time. It's now the new SAI. Contributor is also another new word. This is anyone who's required to provide information on a student's form. So that can be a parent, a step parent, or a spouse. The IRS Direct Data Exchange replaces that IRS data retrieval tool. So we're going to talk about this more in just a minute, but the IRS Data Directed Exchange, it pulls information directly from the IRS. So information about your taxes straight into the FAFSA form. So you opt in to actually using this. It's going to streamline the process and hopefully alleviate some human error in it. You do have to opt in order to submit a FAFSA. So there's, if you decide to opt out of it, it's highly encouraging you to make sure you do opt in so that you can successfully submit the FAFSA. We've kind of touched on this before. There's fewer questions. It's more user-friendly. I just talked about that consent to use that IRS Direct Data Exchange. And again, very important, without consent, the FAFSA cannot be submitted. One change is now students can list up to 20 colleges at one time when they submit the FAFSA. It used to be less. And FAFSA will ask for the number in college, but this is a new change. It's not used to calculate SAI. One thing at the University of Denver, we also use a CSS profile, which we're going to talk about in a second. It does ask for the number of college and it actually does include it in our institutional need-based aid calculation. So it's really similar on that side as the old FAFSA used to be. Some students will also automatically be awarded a Pell Grant based on income information, regardless of SAI. EFC used to be determined, and there was a chart that if your EFC fell within the threshold, you may be eligible for a Pell Grant. So that's totally changed. The parent that is responsible for submitting the FAFSA in cases of divorce or separation has changed from who the student lived with to who provides the greater financial support for that student. So that's a big change. Family farms and small businesses are now reported as assets as well. So our website has great information on what are the changes, what's different, what's new, what are some tips for successful completion of the FAFSA and CSS profile. So I highly encourage you all to visit our webpage. It has so much information. And also Federal Student Aid, basically the one who has the FAFSA, and they have a lot of information that changes. Now, they also publish some known errors with the FAFSA, which that's, it's a new transition. So they're updating it every day with new info. Okay, so the CSS profile. This is an additional application. I call it a FAFSA 2.0. It uses all the same information as the FAFSA does, but it goes into a little more detail. So you may be looking at some other universities that don't require the CSS profile. University of Denver does, and it's usually for private institutions that use this. So there is a $25 fee associated with this, but it's actually automatically waived if a family's AGI is less than $100,000. And that's cssprofile.org is where you go to complete it. So exactly like the FAFSA, it collects tax data from prior year, so the 2022. Okay, so what's the difference here? FAFSA and CSS profile have now aligned. They're the same for that parent of record. So who provides the most financial support to the student? Both do collect step parent data if the parent is remarried. One does not collect home equity. CSS profile does. So it goes a little more in depth on that. On the FAFSA, it does not collect a non-custodial parent information, but the CSS profile does. And they both collect assets as day of the completion and still using the same tax year information. Okay, so what are you going to need to complete these forms? So your federal income tax return for 2022, but you're opting in to use that IRS tool, which automatically brings in that data without you having to enter it. So that's great. Sometimes you'll need W-2 forms. You'll need social security numbers for the student and the parent, savings checking, asset information, and having created that federal student aid ID and that College Board account. If you're taking AP classes and tests, you most likely will already have a College Board account, so that might already be set up for you. Okay, some common errors. Again, I know I've said the IRS directed exchange a lot already. It's because it's required to be eligible for students and parents to get the information into the FAFSA. It really minimizes the additional documents requested from our office as well, and it ensures consistency between the FAFSA and the CSS profile because we look at both applications. Make sure you know your date of birth and or your parents. Sometimes we see that flipped a number every once in a while. So that's always a key point to remember. And if your parent is remarried, the current spouse's information is also included. And another big one is asset values. Retirement funds are not included in any investment value. And when you're going through and completing the FAFSA and CSS profile, there are little help buttons as you're going through that help and provide a little more information about what it's asking you. And really monitor your email. We communicate a lot directly to students and families about documents that are required. Okay, so what happens next? You've done both applications. You've input all the numbers, and you've submitted everything. So this is used to determine that SAI on the FAFSA. So, and financial aid or financial needs determined all around that. So you subtract the SAI from the cost of attendance, and the SAI is going to be consistent to you, but your cost of attendance depends on what school you're going to. Are you living on campus, off campus, at home? It all varies based on your situation from student to student. All right. So we've done the applications, we've submitted everything. So now let's talk about what aid is available to help pay for college. So now that you've applied for aid, you may be eligible for grants and scholarships, student loans, work study, other institutional scholarships as well. So yeah, federal, state, and institutional aid. One thing to know is aid that's awarded based on that student aid index and financial need is really contingent on the FAFSA and or CSS profile. So those applications are very important to submit. There may also be some other academic criteria as well. GPA, class standing, major, it's just all very dependent. All right, so let's talk some scholarships here. So scholarships can be awarded on merit, like I just said, your GPA, maybe your class standing, your major, or it can be awarded on need. So looking at your financial aid data, your FAFSA and CSS profile, a combination of both. These do not require repayment. This is free money here as long as you meet the eligibility requirements. Grants are usually federal and state grants. They do require financial need, and again, these do not require repayment. So loans. Loans can be for students and parents, for state or private student loans. These do require repayment. And that federal student aid website gives a lot of information on how to repay it. And you actually go through that entrance counseling to talk about what logistically does this look like. Student employment is also a great opportunity for work study. It's a federally subsidized program. We have some work study students in our office, so does admissions. There's a lot available all throughout campus. And students earn this as a paycheck, so it is a job. This does not require repayment either. So some DU departmental scholarships. So for incoming students, departments will actually reach out to those qualified students and provide application information directly. So there's no additional scholarship application that first year students need to complete. You'll be reached out to if you meet those qualifications. Now for continuing students, so you've been here a year at DU, you're moving on maybe into your second year, we have a departmental scholarship application that opens in early March. to be awarded for those scholarships the following aid year. You'll get emails when the application is open and reminders as well. You do have to have a declared major. So hopefully after, you've been at DU a year, you've found what you like, maybe you've made changes, and you've declared a major at that point. And just like before we talked about, some scholarships have need-based requirements, some are merit, some are both in combination. And really the number of scholarships, the amount of scholarships, and the types of scholarships vary from academic department, years from year to year for budgetary restrictions as well. All right, so there are private scholarships. There's a couple websites there where you can find additional resources to apply for other scholarships. Your high school could also provide you a list. If you're involved in any clubs or activities and organizations outside of school, they may have scholarships that you can apply for as well. And that's just where you can bring the scholarship check, or the donors can send the checks directly to us and we'll apply it onto your account. All right. So you've done everything needed. You've done the FAFSA, the CSS profile. You've been evaluated for aid and scholarships and grants. You get a financial aid offer letter. What is it? So it actually provides an overview of all of the financial aid you're going to qualify for. And this can include some other information on other remaining costs, like those indirect expenses that you're not billed. So our awarding timeline here, based on when you submit your admission application, we have some priority deadlines for submitting the CSS profile. One thing I do want to say, priority deadlines are not hard deadlines to where you can't submit the FAFSA or the CSS profile after this date. This is just a deadline we suggest that says, hey, you should submit it by then if you want to receive a timely financial aid offer letter. If you don't meet that deadline or you're a little after, it's okay. You'll still be offered the aid that you're meant to be offered. So like I said, it's broken down into which application you submitted. And this is all also on our admissions website. So there's more information there. Students will be receiving financial aid offer letters as long as you've done the FAFSA and CSS profile and submitted any other additional information. You'll get emails when it's available. Like I said, we communicate a lot to students with what's needed, some helpful information as well. Okay, so we understand that we're looking at 2022 information. It's 2024. Things can change. Situations happen. If that's you, you're going to want to contact the financial aid office to work through a special circumstance appeal. We have a lot of information on our website about what constitutes as an appeal, what information needs to be provided, and basically the form to submit through our office as well. Our appeals community reviews this, and it can only happen after you receive that initial financial aid offer. So in that March, April-ish timeline, when you get your financial aid offer and you say, hey, financial aid, something's changed, that's when you can work on those special circumstance appeals. And here are some more examples of this: loss of employment, divorce or separation, medical costs not covered by insurance. Again, more information is on our website as well. Okay, that was our presentation about financial aid. So that's our direct phone number. That's our direct email numbers. We also are on Campus Open as well. Our hours are Monday through Wednesday and Friday, 8 to 4 p.m. and on Thursday, 12 to 4 p.m. We're always around to help, ready to answer your questions. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn this back over. I know there's been some questions and answerings happening in the chat here as well.
Hey, Stephanie, there was a question that came in that I thought was a good question that might be helpful to more people. I was wondering when the FAFSA and the CSS profile is asking about assets, what is that defined as?
Yeah, so there's going to be so much information on this specific question that it's asking you. So the CSS profile asks for some more in-depth information. They may ask, what's your business? Do you own a farm? Do you have multiple houses or income properties? What's your mortgage on your house, or what's your house valued at? Like I said, don't include retirement accounts values in that asset column. But it just tries to get a full picture of the student and family's kind of financial situation. So then we can use that to help award aid equitably.
Another question that came up was that they understand that the new FAFSA doesn't take into account siblings who are concurrently in college at the same time. How does DU handle that situation?
Yeah, so because DU uses that CSS profile, so that additional application, that information is actually gathered on the CSS profile and included in the calculation for institutional need-based aid. So it looks like it has always looked as like the old FAFSA with that CSS profile. So that information is important for institutional aid. Like you said, federal FAFSA has changed their calculation on it, but hopefully with expanding the Pell Grant access as well, it kind of is all encompassing in that.
Great. Um, we also have this question, which, oh, good, the questions are starting to come in, so this is amazing. This is my favorite part. Can you talk about what the residence hall grant is?
Yeah, so the Residence Hall Grant is awarded to students from along with their admissions merit scholarships. And basically it's saying if you're living on campus in one of the approved dorms, you'll receive $3,000 a year or $1,000 a quarter. So DU is on the quarter system, which is a little different than all other universities. And as long as you are living on campus in an approved housing, that'll apply toward your tuition charges.
Great. And then another question was about, let's see here.
So I see there's a question about some people have completed the FAFSA in early January and they did get their SAI. Has anything changed? Do you need to go back in? The answer is nothing has changed. Congratulations that you submitted it. That's amazing. You're very ahead of the game here. If you've not submitted it, you are not behind. That's something we also want to stress. You know, the website's going through changes. There's been some delays, some glitches. Sometimes families have logged in and not been able to even access the website. Now that was during their soft launch. Now it's up and live 24/7. So nothing has changed if you've submitted it like calculation wise. So if you're struggling to submit it, you are not alone. But they have a FAFSA helpline that's really amazing to help out if you do have any specific questions. It is busy, but you will get your questions answered.
And talk a little bit about how you report 529 plans.
Yeah, so 529 plans. I'm reading the question here. So between the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So you're going to want to only report what's for the students portion. So sometimes people have multiple for different students. Only the students you're submitting the FAFSA for. The CSS profile does, oh, the question just disappeared. So I
Oh,
was trying to read
my
it again.
fault.
That's okay, no worries. So the CSS profile also does ask that same question. I'm not sure if that kind of answers the general
Yeah,
question there.
yeah, I think it does. Um, so one question is because we have some of our students that are already admitted, yay! And we have some students that haven't yet started the financial aid process. So if a student is going to be applying, maybe they're a junior this year or a sophomore, but this process happens when do they start the process? Like what year? And then therefore what taxes?
Yes. So I will say this 24-25 year is very different than the standard. So it's hard to base your usual maybe in the future off of. So the FAFSA opens in October. This year it opened in December. So when you're a high school senior and you're starting to look at what colleges is college for you and seeing what options are out there, your senior year, it actually will open in October. So you can start completing the application then, and it uses prior year taxes. So the 24-25 FAFSA uses 2 years ago, so 2022. I'm going to try to get the years right here because what year are we in? The 25-26 FAFSA will use 2023 taxes. So you should have that tax data have already prepared and complete so you can submit the FAFSA as well.
I do want to talk a little bit about departmental scholarships because I think that it's important to talk about some of the expectations of what a departmental scholarship may include or may not include, and sort of those amounts and how available they are. Because I know from an admissions standpoint, we're more about give all the money up front so that families have all the decision-making tools available to them. But I think there is that hope that maybe a departmental scholarship will come in at the last minute and kind of fill the rest of that gap. So can you talk a little bit about those expectations?
Yeah, so for first year students, so you're coming in your first year at DU, most, like I said before, if students are in certain majors, they will be reached out to directly by departments. I will say our additional departmental scholarships are limited for first year students. But when you're already here for a year, that continuing departmental scholarship application has a lot of opportunities for most majors, most GPA levels above a 2.0, if you have financial need or not. This way you can kind of figure out what major you want, what you like, what you don't like, because when departments are awarding scholarships, they want to see, hey, they've been in classes, they like this major, it fits them, they suit you. And we have a lot of essay questions that students answer for departments to help kind of evaluate that process. The standard minimum to keep like any scholarships or your admission scholarships as well is a 2.0 GPA and meeting satisfactory academic progress. So what does that mean? That's being and also being enrolled full time. So that 2.0 GPA and completing 66.67% of the classes you attempt for that time. So we want to see you progressing. You're taking classes and succeeding in those classes as well.
I also want to mention that the amount of money that we give out on the merit side is much more significant than the departmental scholarships. These are smaller awards that help fill in small potential gaps based off of need, usually. And so just to kind of keep those expectations of, relatively normal, that these scholarships do tend to be small. And as Stephanie mentioned, really for our continuing students, we don't want students choosing their major based off of the money that they receive. We also want to give them the flexibility of changing their major if they decide that they're not in they find different interests and they add different areas of study. We also had some questions about working on campus, and I think this is a really good way to be able to talk about how you can work on campus. And Stephanie, I don't know if you want to, because I can talk about it on a non-work study side as a supervisor, if you want to talk about it more of like how that works as a work study piece.
Yeah, so for sure. So when you're completing the FAFSA, there's a question on there that says, hey, would you be eligible in work study, yes or no? If you say no, that doesn't mean you're never going to be able to offer it. You can reach out to our office, and maybe if we have additional funding and you're eligible, we could offer it to you later on. But really what happens is you're offered a maximum amount that students can work dollar amount up to. So let's say $3,000 or $2,500. That's going to be on your financial aid offer letter when you receive it. It'll talk about work study fund, how how to find a job, and it's not actually given as a scholarship, right? So you're not going to get that $2,500, $3,000 right away. That's the maximum amount students can work up to. So students work between 10, 20 hours maybe on campus, depending on what pay rate is, what they're working, their class schedule. And it's a great opportunity. Students earn it as a paycheck, so it doesn't, again, go directly to their bill, but they could use it to pay their bill, other expenses as well. Students get real life job experience while they're a student, and the employers know you're a student. You're a student first, so they won't make you work. They're very flexible during finals and classes, and it's a great opportunity. I will say I was a work study student when I was in college in the scholarships office, and I'm still in scholarships. So I've never left, and it's a great experience. And we have students in our office who biology majors, business majors. They didn't set out to be in financial aid, but they like working in our office. It's a great experience. And I know, Shayna, you all have some awesome work study students.
Yeah, we also have actually a pretty significant number of non-work study, just student. So what work study really means is that where the money is coming from. So whether that comes from the state or the federal government, or in the case for a lot of our tour guides, it's actually coming from our own department. The nature of the job doesn't change at all. It's just where the money comes from. So we have students that are who are just they're not eligible necessarily for work study, but they do want to have a job on campus and help with the earning money to be able to pay for pizza on the weekends or textbooks or whatever, so expenses. And so we have a lot of different jobs that are on campus. Some of them are focused on just where that money comes from, work study, but there's actually a pretty significant number of jobs that are on campus that you don't have to be work study eligible, like being a tour guide, like working in the athletic facility, and you still have all that flexibility of working on campus, making those connections, and being able to have a department or an employer who understands your work schedule and your school schedule. So I think it's a highly recommended, but up to like 30 hours. Don't be working, if you can, no more than 30 hours. Then your grades do tend to suffer, and so we try to avoid that at all costs.
So there was some questions about how does the cost of attendance change from year to year? And do you receive the same amount of aid through the 4 years? So speaking to the cost of attendances, that there's a couple of factors that affect that. If you're staying on campus or off campus 1 year, or if you're living at home, what's your room charge going to be for that specific quarter? What meal plan are you going to suggest? So that can change your cost of attendances. Tuition can increase from year to year, so that can fluctuate as well. If you're awarded an admissions merit scholarship, and we've touched on this a bit, you'll receive that same scholarship at that same dollar level for all 4 years that you're attending. So that does not change. What can change from year to year is more of the need-based scholarship components. So federal grants, Pell Grants, maybe work study, a different loan offer, some departmental scholarships if they're need-based can fluctuate from year to year. But if your financial situation on your taxes are similar, so should your aid offer be from year to year. And like we had that special circumstance appeal we talked about in our presentation, if something has changed, that's what that's there for, to help kind of bridge that gap and that change, because we're looking at older data. It's now, it's not always reflected in current times.
We do have a question about merit scholarship. Merit scholarships comes from the admission side of the enrollment division and is based off of your academics and rewarding you on how well you performed at the high school, typically the high school level. We have some transfer students as well. So it's really focused very heavily on the academic side, and it can range anywhere between 12,000 and 36,000 with the inclusion of the room grant. And so that will be in your acceptance letter, and that is not reevaluated from year to year. That is essentially, we are going to say you get that, you multiply that times 4, don't divide that times 4. Those are annual awards, and so that's rewarding you on how well you did, and congratulations. That's pretty amazing. Obviously, you all have worked very hard to be able to be admitted to DU, and we're very excited for the opportunity to share everything that DU has to offer you. And we do, it seems like the questions are starting to slow, and I did want to mention that we have a variety of sessions that are being offered the rest of this week and all of next week. This week The virtual open house sessions tend to be very big picture about big programs that we offer at DU, like our Learning Effectiveness program for students with learning differences or accessibility at DU. We have programs that you're going to learn about the honors program or the leadership program or living in learning communities. Next week we have study abroad and housing. And then 26, I think, different majors are highlighting their programs. So I hope that this is just the start of the conversation that we are having with families. And if you want to continue that conversation, we are excited to do that. You can reach out to your admission counselor. If you have any questions, follow-up questions with financial aid, they'd love to be able to chat with you about that. We also continue to offer in-person visit programs, which is nice to be able to say that again. So we offer for our admitted students our Journey to DU program, our half-day visit programs called Friday at DU. There's just a lot of different opportunities for us to be able to interact and get all of your questions answered. So I want to say thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, Stephanie, and the rest of the panel who are answering questions in the background. Thank you so much for your evening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.